Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining me here and thanks for checking out my podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel and click the notification bell for new episodes. You can also find Shine Without Shame on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. So today my guest is Gini Beasley. Ginny is an eclectic soul trying to actualize in the body of a 44-year-old whitish woman living in the Midwest whose ancestors are Sicilian, Irish, and German immigrants. She is a wife and mom of 3 kids, 3 dogs, and 1 magical cat. Ginny first found peace and the meaning of life in nature, then the yoga mat, and finally within. She is a definite foodie, a longtime yogi, a reluctant homeschooler, and a hobby herbalist that also has a day job. This year, Jenny is focusing on staying sane while social distancing and working from home. While these things keep her mighty busy, wherever she has been on the journey of life, she has found herself seeking truth, divine connection, personal growth, and ways to bring people and ideas together. Thanks so much for joining me today, Jenny.
Thank you for having me, Tiff. It's an honor.
You and I go way, way back. We met many years ago when I was also living in the Midwest. And I remember that there was just this instant connection. You and I met through, I think, a mutual friend or through our community, and we got together and just our friendship started, I think, the day we first met and started to chat about our lives and what we're interested in. And I always appreciate how effervescent your spirit is. You are always, always wanting to shine your light and bring people into that light and help people feel comfortable. And I always appreciate how at the same time you're serious about life, but you also kind of just want to enjoy it, don't want to take it too seriously, and you keep your smile a constant. So those are
Thank
some
you so
qualities,
much.
of course. I've always
I
appreciated that about you.
I think right from the get-go, I really appreciated that I could have really honest, authentic, deep conversations with you. Like we always it would always unfold into all these different directions from health and wellness to spirituality to metaphysical stuff to you know, way more practical everyday life things. But yeah, I've enjoyed our friendship from the get go. I think being a transplant from the West Coast into Chicago, like a lot of newbies, I subletted an apartment in Rogers Park, and which is a really diverse, eclectic neighborhood in Chicago. And you were one of the first people that I wound up connecting with. And interestingly, you and a couple others I've just stayed in contact with through the years and made lifelong friendships from that chapter of time in my life that I'm so grateful for. So it was a good chapter. So thank you so much.
You got it, girl. Thank you. It's also meaningful and a really special time in my life as well. So I fondly think of those years, and I'm glad that we're connecting now. It's been a while since I think we've really had some time to go deep on subjects that interest us. And as you know, this podcast is really about exploring what shame is about, the culture of shame, but also I really want to talk about and explore how we can move away from shame and really as individuals and hopefully then collectively find ways to be happy, to live our best lives, and to really use our gifts and talents without feeling like we need to feel badly, we need to shrink so that others don't feel like we're outshining them. whatever
Yeah.
that really means. And this is something that I want to explore. So I thought that we could talk about a little bit about your background. You have such a rich, ancestral background. Your lineage is rich, and you seem to just really come from a family that has a lot of life, a lot of vibrancy. And I know that there's also been some challenges, but please, talk about where you come from and
Oh,
how that's kind of led you to where you are now.
okay. Well, like everybody, my first few years of life were the most formative. And I think I was immensely blessed with being born into a big, loud, boisterous, happy Sicilian family. And um, and one of my first transcendent moments was eating my grandmother's cannolis in her kitchen, just like literally sitting there and feeling bliss. And even in Little Italy, New York, I've never found another cannoli that was as good as that. It's been a lifelong search. Um, or her eggplant parmesan. And, you know, that was just, I think that was the seed that made me a foodie. I mean, I'm always thinking about food. I joke my father's Sicilian and my mom was Southern. So, I mean, it was all about food in my house. We were already thinking about the next meal as we were cleaning up the last one, and you just sit down for breaks in between meals and like there's so much preparation and there's a lot of joy around food. And we moved to Oregon, sort away from that big family when I
Mm,
was about 5, 6 years old. And um, there it was more solitary and quiet, isolated and lonely at times. But my parents wanted to give me a better life out of the city of San Diego, with the crazy traffic and overpopulation. And they weren't like full on hippie back to the landers, but they were definitely searching for something more wholesome. And we moved to Southern Oregon down in the Rogue River Valley.
mm,
And there, a lot of my formative years were just spent out in nature. That really shaped a lot of who I was. Looking back on it, I think I was just really fortunate in the way that I just compared to children now that spend so much of their childhood looking at a screen, and
mm.
that's their like platform with connecting with classmates. Um, I just spent it outdoors, just like laying in a field, staring at the sky, contemplating the nature of things. And I really wonder about this generation, like, without
Mhm.
like that sort of gray area that a soul needs to develop without being like busy, 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 entertained and stimulated all the time. I had plenty of boredom and loneliness as a kid. And yeah, it's uncomfortable as a child, but in hindsight, as an adult, you see how it served you to develop as a human being.
Right.
So I'm very grateful I had that.
Yeah, that sounds really really ideal in a lot of ways because like you said, that sets you up for how you deal with life in the future, how you deal with challenges and being able to connect to nature. Being able to connect to nature no doubt is such a gift. It's like
Mhm.
medicine, free medicine. And so I'm glad that that was a part of your life, and I know it still is
Yeah,
in many ways.
it was really foundational. But you go into adulthood and modern life and you know it's easy. I think so many of us like really get swept up with all the sort of like ambition and things to accomplish and we live in our heads. And, we kind of have to get back to our roots and remember who we are and where we came from. I'm in my 40s now, and so much of my 30s and 40s so far have been about that. You have to go off when you're a young adult and rebel or figure out things for yourself, find your own way, start to build your career and path for yourself. And then there's this coming back to it, especially like
Mm.
once you have kids. For me, it was like a very reflective time about consciously deciding what I wanted to have in my life, what kind of values I wanted to share with them, what kind of life I wanted to give them. So it's kind of where I'm
No
at
doubt.
now.
Yes. It's quite a process. And would you talk I know you've shared a little bit about your history with your family and some of the challenges that, some of your relatives have gone through that you were,
Yeah.
part of in some way, shape, or form. Would you, if you would, share a little bit about that and what has been some of the learnings that you've taken?
Well, um, you know, I think I've contemplated a lot about this through the years. On my father's side, they were a family of immigrants. So I think that immigrant story of searching for a better life and being displaced, um, and trying to create a sense of community and something new from scratch is something that vibrates in me.
Hmm.
And on my mother's side, there is something that I identify with is this deep mother wound because my mother, my maternal grandmother, was an alcoholic. Um, and so my own mother had a very traumatic childhood. And even though she was very conventional and traditional, she is a rule follower. She went, as many adult children of alcoholics are, she went the opposite route and was very square and structured in her own life to compensate for the chaos that she endured in her childhood. And when she talks about the stories that I grew up with around my maternal grandmother, um, you know, it they were profound because my mother was a devoutly religious woman who always spoke of forgiveness and maintained a relationship with her mother through her entire life, even though um, her own childhood had really been horrible and she'd endured every kind of abuse.
Hmm.
But I remember when she spoke about our family line on that side, I was able at a young age to feel empathy and compassion for my grandmother because her own mother, for whatever reason, had rejected her. Now it's too far back. We don't know why. I don't know the ins and outs of it, but I know that poor great grandmother of mine lived in a farm in Arkansas with way too many children.
Hmm.
And what we know now, the poor woman had her own mental health issues. She was probably, dealing with poverty and nutritional deficits from bearing too many children. And, my own grandmother ran away from home when she was 13 or 14 to escape her abuses from her own mother. So, how deep those wounds go through the generations is something I've contemplated. My mom and I have worked really hard in our lifetimes together to have a friendship now as adults because she was very structured and authoritarian. growing up, and my own spirit. I was a rebellious free spirit. I locked horns with her every chance I got, and I questioned everything.
Mm.
And I think it was maddening for them, honestly. I questioned all of their choices. I was not the child that accepted anything. And I often like used to think she would have preferred, like a sweet, like easygoing, happy to wear the pink dresses and shiny shoes daughter, questioned everything. And even though they took me to church, I twice, 3 times a week sometimes, I had to come to my own terms with religion. I started questioning it very early on. And I questioned their choices. Like my parents did foster care, they were very service oriented. And they taught me to love God and pray. But it wasn't very long before I really questioned what the church stood for, because I followed the evening news and politics, and I was really troubled by the fact that this loving God that my parents had taken great care to introduce me to and nurture a relationship with could ever be used to oppress women or minorities or gays. And I saw those sorts of prejudices in my own communities where I lived. I saw racism, and I saw how people could weaponize religion. And I just really had to sort all of that out for myself. So, uh,
And yeah, that's so interesting that you through religion, that's or through the challenges of religion, that is or at least the challenges that you were were seeing from the people who were a part of, I guess, those religious communities. You that was your backdrop for a real search for truth.
yep.
And so where did that take you? Because I know you talked about being connected to, sort of more connected to the earth and nature because of where you lived in Oregon,
Mm-hmm.
and that I know you've explored all different sort of modalities in terms of well-being. How did how did that questioning and that search for truth lead you to want to explore, I guess, all these different ways of connecting with yourself? In other words, it sounds like religion, maybe you loved God, but you weren't so thrilled about other aspects of the organized part of it.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
how yeah, talk about why that, or how that moved you toward exploring the truth for yourself in other ways.
yeah. Well, first of all, I rebelled against my parents and their conventional upbringing in so many ways. And like a lot of kids out in Oregon in the 90s, I experimented with drugs a lot. And I don't recommend it. And for the most part, it's not spiritual at all. But I did try psilocybin,
Ooh, what's that?
magic
Oh.
mushrooms. And now and of course, I used cannabis, but like honestly, that experience, that that was a huge shift for me in my spirituality. Um, Coming out of like the first trip I had, and I realized that everything I knew about life was just a droplet of what there actually was. And there was so much more to reality and the universe, and it blew my mind in the best way. But I don't recommend it. I think I feel fortunate. I did not I stumbled across that experience unconsciously. It wasn't something I entered into consciously or mindfully. And in my youth, found myself in a lot of unhealthy and dangerous situations in this time of searching for truth because I rejected all the good things. I rejected everything they put in front of me and had to. And at the same time, even as I was doing and acting out in a lot of unhealthy ways, my connection to source remained. I would still just frankly pray to find truth. I wanted deeply to know what it was. I did not want, I felt a restlessness or like a curiosity that it wouldn't rest until I knew how to understand it and make sense of it. Like, how does religion fit into all of this? I knew that I struggled deeply with the fact that Christianity, I believed that Christ existed. And at the same time, I knew that he would not be happy, that it couldn't be, that truth could not be all the schisms that exist across the Christian faith. And I knew that it never bode well with me. And I even asked my pastors about this. I was like, so you're saying somebody like a Buddhist person that lives a really good and noble life, they wouldn't go to heaven because they don't believe in Christ? It just, those sorts of things, I couldn't reconcile them. It's not logical. It sounds like superstition. And so I had to really sort through those things. And I came to a place where I was really searching for truth. And eventually, what came up for me, and it's my truth, is that the Baha'i faith just came up over and over and over again. Every time I would be searching and praying for truth, it would present itself. I would meet another Baha'i. I would stumble across a Baha'i book. It was like these little tokens. So for me, when I got my head around the faith, it gave me the answers and put the pieces of the puzzle together in a way for me of what I've been looking for. It created a cohesive understanding of human history and how it worked. It gave a framework that I could understand life in. So for me,
Okay, part of your search for truth led you to a specific religion, led you to the Baha'i faith, you said.
yeah, part of
And
that. And it's not like that's been perfect or all I've been enlightened ever since at
sure.
all.
Well, it's an ongoing process. But what
Yeah,
I'm
but
also curious about is because of your love for yoga, your interest in yoga, your interest, I know you have an interest in like herbology and
mhm,
herbs as medicine. How did
absolutely.
those paths also emerge through your process of searching for truth for yourself?
Yeah. So, after going through a really painful divorce in my early 20s, got married too young, didn't know myself well enough, didn't have healthy boundaries, all that. Went through a painful divorce, and I found myself on a yoga mat at a Bally's Fitness. And I'd been trying to meditate for months and was just so frustrated, like in that classic, like, oh, like I just couldn't calm my mind. I was like beyond restless and feeling like I can't meditate. I can't do this. And I gave up. And then one day in the middle of a yoga sequence, I realized I was meditating and I had incorporated breath and movement. And that was like like light bulb. And I realized that meditating didn't need to be sitting in the yoga position or in the lotus position, with your mudra and your om. It can be that, and sometimes it is, but it can be walking. It can be, and I mean, for me, where I was able to kind of clear my mind and find some peace was through the practice of yoga and with movement and breath, being intentional together. And it's like, whew, you can get some really laser focused, clear work and soul knowing on the yoga mat. And it's sort of like being in prayer or chanting for a long period of time. It's like you can get to that place. And honestly, with the herbs and the natural remedies, I've thought about that, where that came from, because maybe it all starts with our mother's homemade chicken noodle soup when we're sick. But, for me, there was a period of time where I had to live without health insurance in my early 20s. And I remember I got hit with a walloping double ear infection as an adult.
Oui.
And I had some kind of cold, flu, upper respiratory thing going on. And I stumbled into a Nature's, which Whole Foods bought out like 10, 15 years ago, that they were a Northwest natural grocer chain, and stumbled into their vitamins and supplements department, just miserable. And the nice girl made a couple of recommendations, and I went home and I took the supplements for a couple days, and it wiped out the ear infection. Within 2 days, I was feeling tremendously better. The fever was gone, and I just followed the directions on the bottle, and I healed myself without antibiotics. And it wasn't like, boom, like I devoted my life to herbalism or anything like that, but it changed how I thought. I'd been raised in an allopathic sort of way, that if something was wrong, you went to the doctor and they treated the symptom. And I realized I'd gone from always being like interested in health and nutrition to being way more like, oh, there are natural things I can do first before I go to the doctor. Well, maybe I can try, taking some extra vitamin C and seeing if it quells this cold, and I think it just, that experience sort of planted a seed and stoked some curiosity of what more could I figure out. And then it's just kind of been that journey ever since. Um, I had some other health issues along the way that weren't being taken care of allopathically, that I had to learn to take control of my own health, beyond the doctor's office. I think a lot of us come to that as we age. Like, the doctor doesn't always have the answer. And so you really have
Right.
to become your own healthcare advocate, and you look to other people in your community that are wiser, have alternative practices. And I've used a lot of different modalities along the way, from acupuncture to, massage or medical mediums, and have gotten so much insight. So I've stayed open,
Mhm.
but the herbs came along the way too.
Very cool. It's I relate to that in terms of exploring all kinds of options that help. It's for me, it's
Mhm.
really a matter of whatever helps, whatever works. I'm
Mhm.
gonna be open to it. I want to use it. Let's just get the whole tool chest filled.
Yeah.
So I appreciate what you're saying, and I'm curious, Jenny. So you described your family origin, in your experience, with growing up, with a family and specifically a parent who was a child of an alcoholic, and you talked about your religious upbringing and exposure and how you questioned the what was going to be true for you. You wanted to search for that on your own. So through all of this experience, all of these experiences, through all these experiences, was there ever a point where you felt, because you were deviating from the family norm or from the some of the, I wouldn't say values necessarily, but some of the approaches or some of the pathways that your family
No, values
took?
would
Was
be
there
appropriate.
Okay. So
Yeah.
was there ever a time when you felt shamed for your different approach or your choice to take a different path or to create different values? Was shame ever a part of that process coming from your family or from, others who were
Absolutely.
talk a little bit about that,
Yes.
would you?
Oh, well, the f- you know, we've learned that self-esteem, it's known now in modern psychology that children absorb their self-esteem from their parents. So, it goes back to that, you know, children are going to do what their parents do, not what they say. So, as a parent, your own child, in a way, the best thing you can do for your children is to heal your own stuff because I definitely sensed that my mom overcompensated to hide her own shame, her own hypervigilance at appearing and being good. And I see that in myself as like this necessity of people thinking that I'm good. And I know I adopted that from her. And I definitely found like my own relationship with shame. Like I went, separate even from my mom or my dad. My dad had a bit of shame to work through with too, because as a Sicilian, one of our dinner table conversations was I had to understand that he wasn't Black, but he also wasn't perceived as white growing up.
Hmm.
He was a non-white as a Sicilian, like
Oh.
we forget that Irish and Sicilians were trash in the 20s and 30s and 40s in America.
Mm.
They were the poor immigrants, they were less than white, and they were this in between. And so, I see now like he held himself with a lot of dignity, sort of like, I don't like, the older Black men in the community that'll wear a suit to the grocery store,
Mhm.
because they, they've had to deal with so many indignities. They hold themselves with such, poise to compensate for that in society. That's a discussion in and of itself. And
Mhm.
that was my dad. He always took great care in how he presented himself. So, I mean, he grew up poor and in the Depression, and those were his stories, and so And I was given a charmed existence compared to what they came from. So much I had to figure out on my own. Being a rebellious free spirit, I had to figure out my own personal boundaries and
Mm.
where I felt shame. Like I was your typical bratty teenager that tried out shoplifting and was pretty good at it. I like when I was 15, 16, I lifted earrings and t-shirts and
Mm.
stuff from mall stores with my girlfriends, and it was like looking back on it now, I was testing boundaries, seeing what I could get away with in the world. And
Right.
and um and now I'm ashamed that I did that, but I'll talk honestly about with you for the sake of learning. But it is shameful behavior, like bad 18-year-old me, right? But I remember once when I was about 20, I walked out of the store with something. It's not like I did it all the time, but for some reason one day I did. And I realized that I was ashamed that was not the person I wanted to be. And I
Mm.
walked back in, even though I could get away with it, I didn't want to do that. And I walked back in and I put it back, and I've never stolen another thing in my life.
That's incredible.
So, I was just a punk teenager having to figure out stuff for myself. I've had to learn my own personal boundaries and my own limits. That was that for me and my story. I know that's not for everybody. I know a lot of people are good and they follow the rules and they make a lot more money than I do usually.
Is there a correlation?
There might be. I think there might. But for me, that
Mm.
was my path and those are my lessons.
Thank you for sharing. That's incredible. This that you're able to reflect back and on those experiences and on that time of your life in your life and know that okay, that wasn't the best behavior, but then there came a point where you got really clear
Mhm.
about the fact that you didn't want that to be a part of your life and you
Mhm.
moved on from it, which
Mhm.
is to me remarkable. I mean, maybe it seems so simple, someone says, "Oh, that's easy to do," but it's a moment. There's all these moments in our lives where we gain clarity or we understand ourselves a little bit more and we say to ourselves, "That's not really who I am." That's behavior that I'm engaging in because whatever, because I want to lash out or I want to test boundaries. But also sometimes I know from experience there are these powerful moments where you make a choice for yourself. And that choice is
Mhm.
based on self-awareness and some sense or understanding that you're meant to be something. You're meant to operate in a different way. You're meant to hold yourself to a different standard. It's very powerful, those moments.
Yeah, that's free will. We have choice. We can always level up from wherever we're at if we choose to.
Yes. And how bringing it to the present, how have your experiences from the past, with your family, with your own personal life and your own choices, how are you focused on as you were talking about being a parent and thinking about uh, how you want to teach your children about good behavior and good and having good character. I mean, it's I imagine I'm not a parent yet, but I imagine that it's it's like a fine line of being a really beautiful thing that you can sort of in some ways not have a fresh start, but have this new opportunity to bring the wisdom, bring the challenges and the experiences that you've learned as a person to your children in a very, I don't know, maybe like in a way that allows you to maybe even work through some of what you went through, or just know that you don't want your children to necessarily go through all the struggles that you went through as a person. I'm really curious. I would be curious to know what that's meant to you as a parent, and thinking about shame or the shameful things you did in the past, and how it can maybe even be tricky to let some of that go,
Oh,
or how
totally.
it comes up when you are parenting. Talk about that.
Um, well, the jury is still out on all of it because my
Hmm.
kids are still kids. They're not
Mm.
grown up. So we're going to see how this goes. But I will say something that I try to do is reflect back to them their own unique gifts because I think the more I think the more any person understands who they really are, not as the constructs that we put upon them from the world, like an A student or a ballerina or a football player, or the things that we measure success by, but identifying behaviors and virtues as they arise in every scenario as you move through life. Like, hey, that wasn't so caring, or maybe you could have been a little bit more gentle, or I really like when you think so. Like, one of my kids is such a deep thinker. He really thinks things through in a very deep way.
Mm.
And I've tried to articulate to him that that's really unique. That's something that makes you very special. Most a lot of people, a lot of adults don't think as deep as he does and
Mm.
reflect as deeply as he does about how things work and why people are the way they are. So, all of that, you know, and in my own marriage, you know, um, my partner his father was an alcoholic. So, in a way, I feel like the work we are here to do is to clear the line.
Mm.
Like, we have these ancestral strings or family stories that shape us and define us, both from our memories and the stories we've been told about our families, and they shape who we are as we're developing little human souls. And then when you have a chance to be a parent, you have a chance to move through parenting consciously. And parenting is such a trip because you get real clear real fast on what you want, what kind of parent you want to be,
Mm.
and what you want for your kids. And then as their little egos develop, they make that really hard on you, those children. And any of your baggage, any of your triggers, they are bound to come up for you to look at straight on.
Hmm.
And I mean, I can't tell you how much, it was like, who's teaching who here? Being a
Yeah.
parent. I mean, it's like you're just really on that process together. It's like, yeah, you're trying to teach them how to stay alive, how to be a good person. And in the meantime, like, you go to bed at night processing. Like,
Mm.
it brings up a lot of deep stuff that you can really,
I can imagine. I can only
yeah,
imagine.
yeah, it's funny.
I love that. I love how, yeah, that's such a reality check for your own life, being a
Hmm.
parent.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not like I'm moving through it consciously every day. Like, especially like in those periods of really stressful times where you get exhausted and you're just caught up in getting them through a chapter of time or a soccer season or helping them level up in something, you just do the best you can.
That is the name of the game, isn't it, Jenny?
Yeah, but it always, for me, honestly, having food to come back to, family dinners every night, like it's for me, just as a mother, like taking good care of myself first, making sure I'm doing some yoga, I'm doing some breath work, I'm saying prayers, modeling that to them. I think there is a huge part of a spiritual process of taking accountability that we learn. You you bring yourself into account each day. You take responsibility. There's a practice of mindfulness there, and that's something I'm working on trying to share with my children. That's something I want to give to them, and I don't know if I've done it yet, but I'm trying.
Sounds very special, like a special process. Well, Jenny, I always end my podcast by asking my guest, which television show, old or new, would you recommend and why?
Oh my gosh, I have watched more television in the last 9 months than I ever have in my whole life, Tiffany.
I believe it. Aren't we all in that boat?
Yes, but all-time favorite show is Mad Men, and hands down, like if I had to pick one show ever, I love Mad Men. But I've
Mm.
also binge watched The Walking Dead with my teenage sons, which was wicked fun this last few months and just what we needed. Right now as a family, I can't tell you just one, so I'm going to tell you my favorites, okay? Can I do that?
Go for it.
Right now, our family is totally digging Julie and the Phantoms on Netflix. It's wholesome, it's light, it has really fun music, and I
Mm.
love the body positivity across the board. It's like you can tell they were really not going the opposite of what Disney does
Hmm.
with like how everyone's so picture perfect and all that,
Mm.
and the stereotyping, and so I really like that. And the music is really fun. So we've been having fun with Julie and the Phantoms.
Never heard of that. I want to look at that.
It's really cute.
Is it animated or live action?
No, it's live, but it's just kind of a sweet
Mm.
family show that we can all watch together. It's adorable. But I really got into Ozark a couple months ago and binged that over a couple weeks. That was juicy fun. That was like a nice, like grown up mom show.
Nice. After 9 p.m.
Hmm.
Love it. I haven't seen that one either. The only one I've watched that you met on your list today
Hmm.
is Mad Men, which I also appreciate as well.
Yes, so good. Oh, and you know what was on Netflix? Was
Hmm.
this one called Good Girls, and it had Christina Hendricks in it. And I mean,
Oh.
and there's this other actress that I totally got into named Retta. She's so
Mm-hmm.
good.
Red is
Like,
great.
did you see Good Girls?
No, I've heard of it, I think, but no, I haven't seen it. I know
No,
Retta though.
Retta's awesome. Like, I fell in love
Mm.
with her. She's so good. She deserves an Emmy in that. Like, she made me cry twice. Like, her performance was outstanding. And it was just it was a good, fun romp. It was like about friendship essentially, and like
Mm-hmm.
housewives getting into a little bit of trouble, and about their like mom friendship bond, but it was juicy and fun. It was like a little bit grown up, but like
Mm-hmm.
not totally after 9 o'clock grown up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Jenny, thank you so much for joining me today. I've really enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you, Tiff. Thank you for having me and letting me babble about myself.
Of course.